Ready for this week's guest? Good, because that's what's next on the Geek Speak Show.
All right, we're back. So a couple of weeks ago, we were at Four Color Fantasies for Free Comic Book Day, and there are a lot of artists and writers. You've seen some of our videos. They were in attendance there, and one of those artists, they had a very interesting and wait for it. We did a whole segment on it, an original story idea. His name is Jeffrey R. Dean, and he's the creator, writer, and artist of Project HOLO, which was a free comic that introduces readers to his multiversal T.E.R.R.A, T-E.R.R.A story, which he's going to tell you about. I know you're asking, like, wait, what is it all about? Yeah, you're going to like this. Jeffrey, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, well, let's start there, actually, because this is going to get the story's going to get kind of complicated if we really get into all the multi-universal, everything else. So let me have you tell everybody, first of all, what is your story all about?
Yeah, so T.E.R.R.A stands for, it's an acronym. It stands for the Tactical Empowered Response and Rehabilitation Agency. The first book is The Empower Phenomenon, which introduces the audience to four kids, Alex, Yukio, George, and Aurora. And as they use their powers in 1947, Roswell, and reveal to the world that not only superpowers exist, but that any kid in the universe can, or not in the universe, but in the world can actually get it. It drastically changes the political landscape, and because it changes that landscape, huge consequences become, more apparent as you read on in the series and the franchise.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, when we were at Free Comic Book Day, it was fun, and I didn't want to take up too much of your time because people were waiting to talk to you also. But now that you're here, it's just you and I. Nobody's waiting for your time. Now we can get into the details. Because first of all, how did you come up with the idea? Where did you get the idea for this story?
So originally I had written a very horrible story. I believe Brandon Sanderson says that every writer has a bad story. Mine happened to have been published in about, I want to say 2012. And the only similarity it actually had was the characters by name. I ended up getting the original idea after visiting Japan and getting pushed to really lean into my artistic side, as opposed to prior. I was I was in college for cell biology and biotech. So I've always had an interest in science fiction, superpowers, gods, and growing up Christian, I never quite understood the hierarchy of where everything kind of sat. You ask one side, they will say one thing. You ask another side, they will say something that's completely the opposite. And as I was going through life, I started to see a lot of connections. And those connections is what originally inspired me to think, well, we live in a universe of cause and effect. So there has to be some way, to string it all together. And I've sprinkled in some, real world details to kind of show that original intent and idea of everything, connecting. I think superpowers are super intriguing. And there are what makes me intrigued about them is that the original inspiration of characters like Spider-Man or let me try and think of another animal-based one, Gorilla Grodd, for example, are real animals. These are characters that were based off of real animals, and animals in themselves comparably have some pretty amazing abilities if we were to put them on paper, like the mantis shrimp punching underwater so fast that it actually creates vacuum bubbles and small bullet speed pops to help with its hunting. So superpowers in history has always super intrigued me. And specifically the World War II era has particularly piqued my interest. With Marvel being a huge inspiration. Um, Captain America, taking place in the 1940s, I felt was the most appropriate. Even Superman, I believe, was 1939.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With it, so I thought that was the perfect doorway into like a large universe.
Yeah, it's what I found interesting that you're basically saying that you're with your stories, you're asking the questions that you weren't really allowed to ask in the real world. So I found that interesting. You also at Free Comic Day, it's on our video on our YouTube. If you guys haven't seen it, you also mentioned that a dream that you had inspired this. What? How did the dream? How did the dream come into this?
So I kept dreaming of the climactic fight of the main character Alex fighting a creature. And for much of the even writing the book itself, that creature was to me very enigmatic and very unknown, and it represents lies, manipulation, secrecy. And as I was researching more about the era, I started dreaming more about the UFO Roswell crash, and how I wanted to incorporate, God's aliens and superpowers in a single story.
That was that a one-time dream? Was it a recurring dream? Or
It was actually recurring. So like I would keep thinking about, like I would keep dreaming about the climax fight of the main character controlling weather and attacking the antagonist, and it would pester me until I was able, like whether I was napping, whether I was going full on to sleep, and after having my visit in Japan and my friends finding out that, oh, I had this character in a super interesting background, they were like, you need to focus on that. Like, start your own studio, do that kind of thing. And when I got back from Japan, um, ever since then, I've just been focused on trying to play out that dream and bring it into fruition.
the dream part, that's what I found interesting. I wanted to get more into that Free Comic Day, but like I
Yeah.
said, there were people waiting to talk to you. But now you can, so I want to get into that if you don't mind. The Have you ever thought why me? Why was I getting that dream and it turned into these stories? Have you ever thought about that or asked that question?
Um, Sort of. So I would, for years now, as I've been working on this series, I would have synchronicities occur. I would think of something and be like, "Oh, this is the natural flow of this idea." Follow that idea, and then I'd find something in the real world that would actually hint, and I'd be like, "Oh shit." I'm sorry, can I say that? It'd
Yeah.
be like, "Oh snap." Um, it it lined up a little too perfectly, um in the aspects of not just how our world government went about it, but the secrecy around it. I heavily implore people to always research World War II history. That is when at least America substantially started lying to the public, and there's a lot of things that have quietly been declassified, uh, that have kind of given me this sense of resolution and vindication that that ironic dream is actually on the right actual track.
Yeah, it's it's been so quiet, these revelations, that a lot of people don't know now. And yes, World War II is a big one, obviously, like you said, but also
Yeah.
even in modern times. Like, for example, we've seen a lot of us listening have lived through 9/11, or at least you remember it.
Mm,
You lived through
yes,
2020,
yes.
what came with 2020. There are a lot of truths that are
Not just
coming
at
out.
9/11, but the Afghanistan war,
Yes.
and
Um,
the lies and secrecy around why we went there as a country or military.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of people probably know, or if not, I'm sure Jeffrey can tell you, I can tell you. If you start going to this stuff, you're gonna go down the deepest rabbit hole you have ever gone down.
And it is just to note, it is very, very easy to get caught up in false narratives,
Yeah.
and come to false conclusions because of those false narratives. It's you come across very interesting mentalities
Yeah.
and ideologies. When my research ended up pushing me into ufology, which in itself is a deeper rabbit hole in that of itself. But when you hit all the right notes, you start to see things, and when you see things, you can't unsee it, and it really makes you it forces you to reframe original beliefs
Yeah.
and ideas of what you thought were the case and everything. It wasn't on display at the free comic book day, but I have it's growing more than 151 pages on like lore maps, um potential histories of how of what we've found as, like, in science, the undeniable histories of like Earth being like 4.5 billion years old, not 5,000 years,
Yeah.
or like the irrefutable, like, history of like Pangea and or dinosaurs, things like that. But like squaring the peg, the round hole with that, and what our ancestors used to refer to these things as. Like, fun fact, dinosaurs is a very Western, uh, European terminology. But if you go over to Asia, they're dragon bones.
Yeah.
So it's all depends on perspective, and learning about these different perspectives is really the key to how I go about my writing. Making sure that I am locked in on who the story is about, but then the perspective that that character brings to the story.
Yeah, those of you watching on the video, you can see me. I'm smiling when, as Jeffrey says that, because yeah, you and I, Jeffrey, we could probably do an entire series on all this stuff. I was when you mentioned ufology. I mean, I'll just put it this way: there is a reason why we're all of a sudden getting all of these shows, and there's a little movie coming out later this year from Steven Spielberg, of all people.
Highly advise watching it.
Yes. So, yeah, we can go on forever with this, but let's focus again on your stories. Let's stick with the dream one more time. Mm-hmm. Now that you are writing the stories and getting them out to the public, has the dream stopped, or did it still keep coming to you?
They come and go, so it depends on where I am. I'd be lying if I hadn't said that there weren't times of anxiety of I need to write this, I need to write this. uh uh Recently, I haven't had any, like, recently as in the last few months, I haven't had any dreams, but I've also been um steadily going through the pace of book three, which is less in the historical lens and more in the characters that I have set up, in everything, making sure that their stories are being told while still expanding. I know that book five very, very different. That one is going to be another deep history dive, and I think I have a strong confidence that that's when my dreams will start kicking in, when I'm doing these deep history dives and my mind starts to subconsciously make these connections.
Yeah, see, and I know with our audience for sure, but I know me. These are the kind of stories that I like, especially now that I get older, and like you said, you learn, your eyes are open to more things that you just took for granted when you were younger.
Yeah.
And that's why I was interested in talking to you about the dream, because I always say God always speaks to us. We just don't listen. I think this is an example of that, exactly that. For some reason, you were chosen to get, whatever the message is going to be out through a comic book, reaching a completely different audience than the typical, the conspiracy theory people, the tinfoil wearing hat people. You're going to reach a different audience with this, and I think you're seeing that already.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of the tinfoil hat people get a bad rep
Yeah.
for when they do recognize something very real. The scientists disappearing is a perfect example of the tinfoil hat seeing something until the public actually starts realizing, oh, this is real.
Yeah.
It,
No, I'm saying, I know in this audience, I know there's probably some people right now listening to us rolling their eyes, yeah, they're those kind of, not really, because you got to ask yourself this question. When these conspiracy theories come out, like calling it a conspiracy, laughing at tinfoil, just using that term, tinfoil,
mm,
you got to think, you got to ask, who started that? Where'd that come from? Who said they're crazy? Always follow the source, is what I always tell people. But let's talk about actually about Nexus Comics itself, because you when did you form? Did you form that first, or how did that work?
so originally, I started the story and writing my story in 2015, I believe. And 2 years later, I thought, all right, I'm ready. I publish, and as I'm rereading the comic and everything, I'm finding art mistakes, story beats that need to be, further explained. And I end up starting the business, the LLC, in 2017. And the particular goal for the LLC is to have a universe that is one fleshed out in the aspects of foundations, so that when you read our stuff, you know that magic exists or science stuff exists, science fiction, normal stories that don't have nothing to do with superpowers can exist. And this is also that I can invite other independent writers to have something on par of Marvel or DC, um, but not gatekeep to a specific thing, which is the point of the multiverse. If it doesn't fall in line with our narrative vision, that doesn't mean we don't want that attention or want that creative idea to be with us. We wholly accept within the multiverse that there's a complete Earth that they can have complete fun with. If there's no superpowers, no superpowers, fine, totally okay. That is the joy of the multiverse when it's not being exploited for cash grabs.
Yeah,
For me, it's not about the money. It's about elevating the creative I IP makers, uh, and instead of milking the IP for just for the cash grab. I think we have enough companies in the world doing that. I don't need to be one of them.
yeah.
I think I'm 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 a firm believer that good products sell themselves, and that I don't need to perpetuate a lie or, you know, just focus on making a good product. And once that good product is out, then I can worry about the, you know, pushing it however way I need to push so that they can actually give it the opportunity that I think that it earned.
Well, your story obviously is, I guess we can consider it the flagship, but at the risk of potentially flooding your inbox, are you reaching out to writers, artists, or how are you finding these new artists?
So I haven't reached out to, well, often for artists, my process is a bit different. So if an artist is sharing their stuff online, or if they're going to conventions, I often like going through Artist Alley and or the artist section of any convention and looking at how they do compositions, how they tell stories visually in their art. I have a lot more business cards of artists from conventions than I tend to reach out for artists online, especially in the age of AI. I value people that put in the work and are willing to grow their craft and aren't pigeonholing themselves to a certain.
I say this, you can take it if you want. I say in the like you said in the age of AI, I say you want artists who create, not generate.
Right. Perfect example of how I think AI should be used is using AI to like maybe prompt and generate a mood board.
Yeah.
Completely okay. I think that is uh, a great way to find inspiration. Using it for artistic critique, I feel is a little wish-washy, only because AI looks for interaction, so it may not uh, guide you in the right way because it's constantly going to tell you, well, maybe you should fix this. Or and then you'll get to a point in AI where it will tell you to just completely start over. And it's a common thing that I think a lot of users of AI don't really highlight. It's really good at consensus opinion. Um, Not so good at creating because consensus is not great at creating. Perfect example is all the horrible movies made by different studios that was done but via board. All the movies that nobody asked for,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like those are all done decision wise, like via a board, and it sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think as more and more people use AI, AI benefits off of iteration, but there's only so many ways that you can iterate before you start repeating somebody else's stuff. It's a lot easier, like you said, to create than to generate. You end up finding that you're putting in less work creating than you would to generate a quality product to the level of somebody who is creating that product.
See what I mean? Another topic that you and I could go on for hours about. We've talked obviously we've talked a lot about AI here on the show because it, as you know, it's a big. I mean, when was it? A couple years ago, it prompted and 2 strikes. So
Yeah.
they were AI was at the head of that. So yeah, it's obviously going to be a big topic for a while. The yeah, when I say artist, I also meant throw in writers. How do you find them? I mean, what I was asking basically is how do you reach out? How do you find new stories?
With writers right now, the only writer that I am working with is one of my friends, who has a character that I plan on introducing in book 4. But I am more so focused on once I know how book 6 will end, that's when I'll start spreading my wings as a publisher, so to speak, and looking at writers. I would love to give people writing advice. So if you need writing advice, I have no problem, like, sharing that writing advice. I'm not soliciting any stories by any stretch of the means. Um, but if you want to know when we'll start taking in writers and everything, we can have people sign up to our newsletter.
Jeffrey didn't tell me to say this. I will say this for everybody listening because I know in this audience for sure there are a lot of up and coming writers, artists, people that want to be in the industry, do their own thing. they're looking for platforms like this, because as you know, there's a lot of gatekeeping with the big name publishers and studios and whatever they want to do. So they look for things like Nexus Comics and things like that. But I always tell them, and you made it very clear, you're not soliciting original stories right now. However, I tell people, take advantage of this. When somebody who is actually doing it, Jeffrey's not sitting around, watching Netflix or whatever and like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a comic. Kind of like in my day, my album's going to drop. Yeah, 30 years later, we're still waiting for your album to drop. That's not that. Jeffrey's doing it. So he's out there. He's out in the trenches. He's doing it. So when he gives you advice, writing advice, I would listen because he knows what he's talking about.
Just to add on, for those new writers, the reality is we all have to work. The 9 to 5 will never not be needed. I work a 9 to 5 outside of this. And the unfortunate reality about this kind of work, especially when starting out, is having to do those doubles and considering it as a double. So if you're having 2 jobs to get by, it be a triple kind of thing. But it is just like going to school, a necessary sacrifice that you have to do. Time is an investment. Time is money, but not just that. It's a commodity that you'll never get back, unlike money. So how you spend your time is just as much as important as how you're spending your money or what you're doing to gain said money.
Yeah.
You can always commit to an 8-hour shift, or in some people's cases, a 16-hour shift, and try to put in 30 minutes on your break instead of catching an eye, writing out beat notes. I think that that's a great way of, pushing inch by inch to get your story still written out and while still full timing in work. And I don't think it is something that's often talked about. I think like the illusion of writing full time is that you're in a room, and sometimes this is the case. You are in a room just writing, but most cases, especially for independent people and indie authors, the reality isn't that. It's I have to go to McDonald's to, put in a shift. And while at McDonald's, if you have an idea, keep replaying it in your head. I think good ideas stick with you, bad ideas disappear. That's the method that I tend to go with. If it's an idea that repeats exactly the same way each time you're thinking about it, it's probably a good idea, or at least an actionable idea. Whether or not it's good or not, I don't want to give life advice. But I think committing yourself to doing things inch by inch is a better method than waiting for the perfect opportunity to write. And that there's no such thing.
Yeah. Well, very well said. And I've always said this also. I mean, today social media tends to warp reality, and people think that instant success is just going to come instantly. But I always say, show the camera. I always say, you can have one of these, a pencil, a pen, but that doesn't make you. It's not going to make you Stephen King. Like that's the exceptions. He can sit at his home and just write, come up with the next book, because he's Stephen King. Not all of you are going to be Stephen King, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So there's that side too. One thing I was thinking about, actually, I wish I had you on the first segment that we did. We were talking about original stories. Everybody talks about, or we were talking about movies and TV shows, but it applies to everything really. When people talk about we keep getting reboots, reimaginings, the same stuff over and over again, they want quote unquote original stories. We defined what it means to us in the last segment. To you, to Jeffrey, when you yourself use the term, or you hear someone say, "We're looking for an original story," how do you define original story in 2026?
How a lot of people think original story. So there's a sweet spot. You have to know what it is. Like if we use Hollywood as an example, you have to know what it is that the people critiques are looking for. They are looking at hundreds of movies, often same. For example, a critic of romance, hundreds of movies in a week, of romance movies that have come out and everything, and it gets very cookie cutter and repeatable, and that often tarnishes a a critic's critique of any one given film, and you can replace the sci-fi, the genre, if you will. And I think books are kind of no different. Fans of books are typically avid readers, whatever it is, whether it's audiobooks, comics, books that they are physically reading. Most people that are into that hobby are typically avid, and if they're not avid, they're very seldom when they have the time, kind of thing. And it's very there's a lot of parallels with that versus, I think, how the Hollywood industry works and why like critic scores are different often than audience scores. Audience members are the seldom readers versus critics are the avid readers. And if you approach it that way, you need to meet that middle ground of nostalgia, which is what audience members really like, but more so, you want it to be different. You want it to be close enough to where it feels like, but not exactly like that. And that's the balance that I, you know, go for. I think any story that you can use two or more, and I lean on two franchises to explain your story, I think is a good balance. Like with my first book, it feels like X-Men meets Independence Day, or Umbrella Academy meets Independence Day. Um, and it has that vibe. Obviously these two or three, like, stories, very, very different. Um, but finding that balance of nostalgia, because obviously stories have to be written, they have to have a plot. Plots can only have so many things for it to be a complete story. It's kind of like finding your art style. But in writing, it's finding that balance of, well, where in my perspective, from my life, can I not just tell a story, but what in my life is kind of unique in my experience of living. And I think that that's kind of where a lot of stories are, taking your personality, not just saying, well, how would I react to this, but how would I react if my personality was different? Like, there are characters like deities that I use, Loki being a perfect example, an established character. I tend to lean heavily on the Eddas, but not just the actions that the Eddas show him doing, but what it means, what kind of person it means to be, to do those kind of things, and applying that to my storytelling also.
Yeah. See, again, another topic that we could go on forever on, but your stories, not just because you said that, your stories, they do fall into the, to me at least, the original category. You guys listening, you can find out. Tell them how. Where are they available right now? The stories, if they want to read them.
Nexuscomics.com.
I have a link to that on the show description. It's all on there. Now, you and I, we met at Free Comic Book Day. Are you going to be going to any conventions, events, anywhere this year?
Yeah, I'm going to be going to LA Comic Con. I didn't specify when we had spoke last time. But LA Comic Con is going to be the next one. I have to check my calendar on other conventions. I think we may be going to one later this month. What is it? The Orange County. Uh convention. I'd have to ask my wife. She's so much better with our
Oh,
calendar.
yeah, I think that one's sort of newish. I think it's FanCon or something. I think it's called. That's the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. I know that we have some tickets that are already purchased, and we're going to be walking around trying to meet artists. I love networking with creatives, getting behind their mind and learning about their craft. It's always super intriguing. We had went to MagicCon um that weekend right after me and you had met on Free Comic Book Day. Um, but yeah, I'd have to check my calendar on conventions other than LA Comic Con that would be going to.
I'll just say you might be able to meet him at one that we're putting together later in the fall. Maybe there might be an
Yeah,
announcement about
yeah,
that. But let them know.
that one also.
Yeah, but let them know where website, social media, where they can follow you.
On let's see, on Instagram, my Instagram is the dot omnigenus. And you can follow us also on Facebook, the omnigenus, or on TikTok, the dot omnigenus also.
Yeah, and again, just to make it easy, I'll link it up all on the. Those of you watching on video, it's probably at the bottom there, but everybody else on the show notes and show description. So, Jeffrey, thank you. Great meeting you, and I'm glad you got to come on and talk about this, tell the story to the Geek Speak listeners, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much. This has been a serious joy, and I enjoyed every minute of it.